Were her eyes always blue? I asked my mother curiously. I was nearly sure that they had been a copper or a light green, but to tell you the truth, I couldn't say for sure. Pandora was more of an outdoor cat, and only came by our house at night for her standard bowl of cat food and a small amount of warm or organic milk. I didn't give a crap myself. Milk was milk. But my younger sister Ellie insisted that Pandora only received the absolute best. Yeah, I think so. Cats' eyes don't just change colors. My mom half responded. She was busy planting a new column of rose bushes, and I chuckled to myself at their moderate disarray. My mother was more concerned with the plant's well-being and happiness over any type of pattern or symmetry. I laughed because I knew my father would roll his eyes when he returned home. They complemented each other, you know. My father, the semi-rigid and planning one, loving to make spreadsheets for every task, which I gave him an endless amount of shit about. And on the opposite end, my mother was the free spirit, preaching love and spontaneity. And even though they were so different, it worked. I only mention this because, well, that's my parents. Two complete opposites in almost every way, together making something else entirely. Something beautiful. My sister Ellie and I had learned what a good relationship looked like from watching our parents interact from day to day. And politically and spiritually, we were somewhere in between them both. Currently, I was back from college for the summer and enjoying daily debates about every topic imaginable with my family. In fact, my mom and I had been talking about the current state of our country, both good and bad, when Pandora had strolled down the driveway at sunset. It had been the first time that I had seen the cat since leaving for college, but I had sworn that she looked different. I just thought that it was a different color. Are you sure that it's the same cat? My mom laughed at that, not noticing she had tipped a cupful of moist dirt onto her new pair of pants. Yes, John, it's the same cat. It was her turn to roll her eyes. Later that evening, we all sat down at the picnic table in my backyard. My mom dished out chicken and asparagus onto 4 plates, and then brought them one by one outside. She was beginning to set them down when my dad chimed in about how to set tables. In nice restaurants, the forks go on the left side, he mumbled to himself. Well then, why didn't you take us to a nice restaurant? My mother asked. He frowned at her. She frowned back, and then they both laughed. Now it was Ella's turn to roll her eyes as the two of them kissed. My sister was paying just enough attention to the evening to be annoyed, a moment later returning to her phone to check Twitter. This was something that my parents agreed on for once. Honey, it's just one evening without your phone, my mom begged. Fine, Ella replied, pretending to shut it off for the night. I think it was around that time when I looked over towards the garage, and I saw Pandora just staring at me. Or was she staring at Ella? Before the mosquitoes started to get the best of us, I had watched her closely and noted that, in 5 minutes or so, she had only blinked one time. I guess that's when it all started. We went inside, but before we did, I saw my sister pick up Pandora to bring her upstairs into her room. I should have stopped her. The next morning, upon going downstairs for breakfast, I was greeted by a restaurant-esque kitchen. My mother and father hurrying quickly around, dishing out food and looking busier than ever. But Ella was nearly motionless, just sitting quietly at the kitchen table. As I sat down across from her, I noted that for the first time in her short life, her phone was nowhere to be seen. Her eyes almost looked different too, and "I'm heading off to work, pal," my father interrupted, nudging my shoulder before shutting the door behind him. I didn't have time to ask Ella if she was alright, or explain to my mother that I had seen the same shade of blue and curious stare from our cat Pandora the previous night. "The two of us are going for a hike," my mother said next, kissing my forehead instead of nudging me as my father had. "Ella said that there's something that she wants to show me." "I can go too," I quickly said, not knowing exactly why I had felt fear. Surprised, my mom replied quickly, "What? No. You have a job interview to go to." Before I could think of some reason to come with them, it was too late. My mother and sister were out the door and headed down the bright green trail into the woods behind our home. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back now, I remember Pandora following a few yards behind them. I went to the job interview and I didn't get it. I didn't care. My thoughts were on the strange, maybe just coincidental, occurrences of the previous night and this morning. I returned home at 5 p.m. and I was relieved to see my mother and sister back safely from their trek into the woods. They were kneeling down together in the backyard, planting something else I assumed, as I strolled over to greet them. "How'd it go?" my mother asked, in a tone plainer than I was used to. "It went fine," I replied. "What do you guys do?" I stared down at the two of them, and I realized exactly what was happening, or what had happened. The roses that she had planted the previous day had been uprooted and replanted. They were now totally in alignment and immaculately pruned to perfection. I had my father's eye for patterns, and I can tell you, their symmetry was perfect. They lacked order, my mother stated, devoid of emotion. Over the next few hours, I watched my mother Laura and my sister Ellie. They said very little as they uprooted every single flower and bush in our backyard and replanted them into one of two lines. I couldn't tell you for sure, but I would bet you that those lines were perfectly straight. When they were done, there was no smile and no words were spoken. The two of them just walked together back into the house, Pandora following behind and then stopping at the back window. The cat stared motionless through the glass and did not move for as long as I watched it. I waited for my father. I would reach him before they could, and we could plan together what to do next. Maybe I could make him believe that they had changed. Maybe there was some way to reverse what had been done. It wasn't long before his silver car pulled up into the driveway, quieted down and sat motionless. I ran over as he opened the door. "Dad, there's something..." As he turned his head slowly towards mine, I saw that his eyes were now a perfect blue. "What's wrong, son?" he asked or maybe stated. There was no emotion in his voice either anymore, and I tried to hide my fear. "Nothing, Dad." I forced a smile. "Dinner's ready," he continued, shutting the car door quietly and walking slowly towards the house. I stopped him one last time. "Dad, did you go to work today?" His footsteps stopped, and his blue eyes focused on my face as he responded. "The office took a little trip today," he said. "Where did you go?" I asked wordly. "We went into the woods." My heart sank. There was something there that I needed to see. His face smiled strangely at that, though it wasn't a real smile. Nothing about him was real anymore, it seemed. Nothing about any of them was real anymore. I followed him back inside and made my way into the kitchen. My mother had set the table before dinner, this time making sure that each utensil and item was perfectly in its place. "Hello, son," she said. This time as she kissed my forehead, it made me cringe. There was no love behind her words or actions anymore, and they seemed to be done only out of routine or necessity. "Hey, Mom," I replied, doing my best to pretend that nothing was wrong. But I suddenly knew what to do next. "Billy asked me over for dinner tonight. Do you mind if I go?" A look of surprise, or was it anger? It fell over my mother's face. "You didn't mention any plans." "I know, I'm really sorry. It's just with the job interview and everything, I forgot." A moment passed as she examined my face and thought it over. "Very well." Walking past her into the kitchen, I checked to see if anyone was watching me. Reaching into the newly organized cupboard, I pulled out a set of matches and I stuffed them quickly into my pocket. I headed back out towards the door when my mom's words called out over my shoulder. "Son?" I turned around slowly, again forcing a smile. "Be back by 9. I want us to go for a walk together as a family." Fear hit me again, but I hid it. "Sure thing. 9 it is," I replied, opening the door to go outside. "Good boy," I heard her say as I closed the door behind me. Billy never asked me over for dinner. In fact, I hadn't even talked to my old friend since going away to college. Intuition had been what had told me to lie. I understood, sneaking around our home and stepping under the shadow of our garage. I listened for any sign of my family approaching, and then I took a deep breath. I grabbed a can of gas my father always kept on the left side of the garage, and then I ran. I ran as fast as I could into the forest behind our home, and I didn't look back. If you asked me if I knew where I was going, or if I knew why I had brought the gas can and the matches, I would have shrugged and honestly said that I didn't know. Something like intuition, or something else had just taken over. As the sun set completely, and I made my way deeper into the forest, I knew there was a reason that I had been called into the woods, but there was something else calling me as well. And as I got closer to whatever it was I was being drawn to, the two opposite forces seemed to make my mind their battleground. When I stepped out into the clearing, it must have been well past midnight. A full moon hung above a patchy set of clouds, and what must have been thousands of lightning bugs flew gracefully around me as I moved closer towards the thing in the center. A reddish, perfect circle glowed in the very center of the field. At the same moment my eyes took in its magnificent sight, I noticed that I was not alone. My family hadn't fallen for my plan, I had realized, as I saw the three of them standing together at the edge of the clearing and watching me with the same set of blue eyes. Pandora sat at their feet, her eyes the brightest of them all. Though the four of them were different, as their eyes gazed through the vast field of lightning bugs and waving grass into mine, I realized that they were somehow the same. I looked back at the red circle and I took a step forward. My family made no attempt to stop me, nor was any word spoken between us. I took another step and then another, and though I could still hear two different voices in my mind, one was winning. I was now only 2 feet or so away from the object, and the voice from the red object beckoned me to take one last step and reach it. I opened the gas can and I poured it quickly onto its edge, threatening it out for the first time. I was sure that I would suddenly feel my family's hands gripping onto my body and pulling me away into the darkness, but nothing like that happened. Sweat poured down my face as I threw the empty container behind me and looked towards the edge of the field. The 4 of them sat motionless, still staring at me in unison. They knew that I wouldn't go through with it. They somehow knew. I turned back towards the object, pulled out the pack of matches from my pocket, and began to cry. I couldn't do it. The deep voice in my head was now more clear and real than anything that I had heard before. It told me why it was here. This was a world in chaos, it said. A world without symmetry. It offered us all a world with perfect order. No more sadness, no more disease, no more governments, and no more war and no more death. No more loneliness.
Just reach out your hand, John, and touch me. Reach out your hand, and you can be free of all the pain that would have been yours alone to bear. You can be part of something that will last forever.
Tears poured down my face now, and I reached out my hand to touch the object. Its red color intensified in anticipation. It was pleased. And then I stopped. One word stuck out of my mind apart from all the others. Free. A lightning bug trailed slowly in front of my face and pulled my eyes away from the red object. I followed the tiny bug's glow back to the field. There had been thousands, I remembered. Turning my head and watching the small creature shine, and then darken in front of a full moon. The points of light moved independently, yet they were still somehow part of something else. As I watched the lights dance across the field, I thought about my father, a firm, planning man. I saw him alone at his desk, toiling hour after hour. I saw him dying alone of a heart attack, just 2 associates from work attending due to procedure. I saw the casket being lowered down, and the dirt being patted perfectly above him. The fake, 2 green grass would be planted, just like it had been a million times before, and everything would move on without him. Maybe it was the same bug that landed on my hand then and began to glow. Maybe it was something else. But as I watched the light flicker and darken on my hand, the vision of my dad was now even more powerful than the voice from the red object had been. Fate, or chance, had set my father on a different path. He had met my mother Laura. He had 2 children who, though we rarely said it, we loved him. He had us. The shining blue eyes of what was left of my family began to run towards me in unison. Their inhuman screams pleaded for me to stop. But fear was replaced by wonder, as something else caught my eye. The lightning bug on my hand walked slowly to the edge of my index finger, glowed for just a moment, and then flew back into the darkness. I lit the match.